Welcome to the Reach the Stars podcast, a collection of conversations with cool people who do cool things. Each episode will bring you inspiring stories of persistence, passion, and purpose. With your host, founder of Papercraft Miracles, Janna Willoughby-Lohr. Welcome to the Reach the Stars podcast, everybody. I am your host, Janna Willoughby-Lohr, and today I'm so pumped. You have no idea. I'm so pumped. My guest is Brave Dave. What? Okay, so Dave Frank is super awesome. I have been following his Instagram account. I don't even know how long, like ages. And he's one of my favorite people on the internet. So I'm really excited that he is here on the show today. For those of you who don't know, Dave is a mental health advocate, an online personality, and chief content officer for WhiteFlag. I'm just going to tell you more about that later. He has a focus and a background in mental health, parenting, relationships, recovery, and strives to give back to the world. I could read the whole bio, but I think Dave would tell us better. So welcome to the show, Dave. Do you want to tell everyone who you are and where you come from?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I got excited when you followed me too, because typically my following is like, just like people. And then I was like, Papercraft. I'm like being followed by entities now, like full blown, like branded, organizations. That was fun for me to see, because I like to click on my following list and then discover somebody that I wouldn't have otherwise discovered. It's a big internet out there. So that's like a really fun way for me to connect with people, which ultimately is kind of the point of why we do all this, right? Is to find other people that do things that we find interesting or share similarities with. So it was cool to see you follow. And now I've got to see the kind of things that you do. So my name's Dave. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I'm in recovery. That's a big deal for me to point out, because it made me part of who I am. It made me, being in recovery now as me is, in my opinion, a better me than me before addiction. So that I really like to point that out to people. I found out I had ADHD a few years back. And since then, my content shifted from just talking about parenting and having parenting comedy content to giving people insight into how my life works, especially because it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and people need to know those dark moments you have with your brain, those dark moments that you have in parenting, whatever it is, you're not alone in that. We all mess things up sometimes, and that's been the focus of my content, is to let people know they're not alone.
I just love it. I love how honest you are with people, and that you do it in a way that sometimes is really sweet and sometimes it's really funny, and sometimes you're like, can you even believe we live like this? And I just think it's great. Sometimes you see people when they're, putting stuff on their Instagram, and you can tell that like they have cleaned everything out of that particular shot so it looks like magazine perfect. And, there's like a big pile of crap like just outside the frame. And then there's other people who are like, this is my real life. I actually have children in this house, and there's no way that anyone's house looks like that if you actually have kids in your house. And I just love that.
Yeah, I don't, that too is important to me, because I don't know how, I still do it today, where, people come over and instinctively, the very first thing I say is, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for whatever you witness. I'm sorry if you find some weird stain in the bathroom that I forgot to clean. Like, I'm so sorry. And they always say the same thing. Oh, you should see my house. I'm like, oh, I have seen your house. It's fucking perfect. What do you mean to see my house? So like that, I never got over that sense that, and even growing up, because my parents were always kind of yin and yang on like, companies coming over, we have to be presentable, versus companies coming over, I don't care what the house looks like, this is what they get. And so I always had like that little internal conflict growing up, where I was like trying to make sure the house looked presentable even as a kid, and that like spilled over into adulthood. And I've gotten a lot better about it now. And I think, like anything, taking the time to practice, having the humility to show your house, having the vulnerability to show what things. I mean, right now, nobody else can see it because they can't see. My office looks like the back room of a Kmart. Like it is not like an office style office. It is a mess in here. But that's because I am a busy person. I'm busy trying to do the things that I want to do. I'm busy hanging out with my kids, which also make messes. They come in here and make messes for me.
Yeah.
Um, and that is a reality that I never accepted for a long time. So little things like that is important to me. Not only because I think it's important to tell you guys about it, but I need that. I need to be able to say that to you guys and say, you know what, that's just the way that it looks like right now. And eventually it won't, but today it does.
Yeah. And it's funny because like I have this handy dandy thing that looks like a sweet backdrop, but like it's just hiding this crap back here, right? Like,
Yeah.
I can't do that Zoom backdrop. My hair is too crazy and it just like cuts off my face and stuff like that. So I literally have like a tablecloth on a t-shirt rack. And it's funny because before I started this show, like I have always kind of wanted to have a talk show. Like ever since like watching Oprah and watching Ellen and Jenny Jones when I was a kid, right? Ricky Lake. I was big on that. Like, oh, that would be so fun to like bring cool people on and like ask them things and see what they say and share stories. And I always thought that you had to have like all this special equipment and special lights and like a soundproof booth and all this stuff. And then COVID happened and there was people like literally doing shows from their bedroom in their underwear. And they're like, this is what's happening. And they had no special equipment. They were doing like, here's my intro of my show, like my, screen capture, where I'm holding my laptop up to my phone so you could see it play on my PowerPoint on my laptop. And like, that was okay. And there was fire trucks in the background and kids in the background and dogs barking and all this stuff. And even on the most professional shows, like that was happening. And I was like, you know what? I could do, I could do that pretty good justice, I think. So yeah. Once I started it, it was like, okay, well, all I really need is like a relatively decent camera, a decent mic, and like some kind of way to make it look like a show. So I was like, oh, well, what do I have in my office? I have this t-shirt rack and I have this tablecloth. So I just hung them up and was like, show is born now. Yay. And somehow I've managed to like keep doing this since August of 2020, which is kind of insane for someone.
So it's farther than a lot of people get, right? I mean, some people just say, I'm not going to start unless I have everything that I need. Mm-hmm. And then they don't because they don't have the $3,000 to spend on all the dream equipment that they want, right? Mm-hmm. But I mean, there are shows that I watch on YouTube now that, are very established. The people are worth, millions and millions net worth, full-blown productions that they own their own studios. And if you go back, not even that far, like 6 years, 7 years back into their, YouTube careers, like the quality and the stage size and whatever else that they were doing, the staff size, you just see where they came from and you realize, well, they didn't wait to start, on anything. They just grabbed what they had and said, I'm going to make stuff until I get to where I need to go. I mean, my content, I always thought, the stuff that I went viral with in the very beginning that like in my mind, I kind of romanticize like, oh yeah, that's when like all the bangers came out. I go back and watch them now and I'm like, good God, this is like the timing is all off. And like, I like didn't shave in this particular one. And like, there's so much stuff in there that I'm like, I would do differently now. But if I had done it differently, it probably wouldn't have been viral, who's to say? So it's always funny to go back and look and see what you came from in the beginning and realize that progress happens on its own.
Exactly. And how do you learn anything if you don't try something first? I'm really curious because I actually don't know. So when did you officially start being a content creator and like what brought you to having that be what you do most of the time?
It was, I think, so most people started like right at COVID, right? Like as soon as it hit, that was kind of people's immediate shift was to do content. I came in the later part of the first year of COVID. So like August 21, I think, maybe something like that. And I didn't even want to do this. I like TikTok was primarily what people used. This was before like Instagram was incentivizing and Facebook was trying to become relevant again. TikTok was primarily it. And my wife was like, you should totally do this. There's like people, there's guys that pretend they're their wives and put like rags on their head to like have girl hair, and you should do skits like that. And I was like, no, that's dumb. TikTok is dumb. Social media is dumb. I'm not doing that. I was very much like a hermit with all that stuff. And I would like watch over her shoulder. I would watch the skits that she was watching, and she would notice me watching, and I'd be like, "Oh, that's so silly! I can't believe you would spend your time." And eventually, she's like, "I won't tell anyone if you get a TikTok. Like, I won't tell anyone that you did that," because I had like old Facebook posts about like how improbable it was that I would ever even own the app at all. Um, and I said, you know what? Fine, I'll do it. I'll try it out just because you think that I would be good at it. And it was like most people are like, you have to grind, grind, grind. I just got lucky, man. I just made some stuff that people found funny and like popped off in like my first 3 videos. And like I've done other accounts now. I've done like anonymous accounts where I did like personas where no one knew who I was. I've helped with business accounts for businesses. And that was the grind from the beginning, where your stuff gets 10 views for like a month. So I did get to experience that, that initial grind too. But all of it in the beginning was just like my wife encouraging me to try something that I didn't want to do. I just got lucky and popped off in the very beginning. And, at first it was like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. You're so right about the way that you say your kid doesn't want to put pants on. But then at some point, someone was like, I have been struggling for a month recently with the way that my kid behaves and not listening to me and thinking I'm a bad parent. And just knowing that you made this video and made me laugh about the way that this is, that just makes me feel like I can go another month. And I was like, oh, that's like slightly impactful. I like to be slightly impactful. I want to continue to slightly impact people. So I took it a little bit more seriously, and then realized that parental mental health was like important, because that was something that I struggled with. So I was like, you know what, if we're going to do this, we might as well try a little bit more than just whatever we've been doing. So that's when I decided to try and commit and make a difference in the way that people were thinking about themselves.
Well, bravo, because it totally works. I think it's great. I wish that I had been on your Instagram and your TikTok like then, right? Because COVID was super difficult for me. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that I'm like a really extroverted person. I don't think anyone's doubting that. And so being at home with my super introverted husband, and at the time we had 2 kids, one of whom was doing virtual school, the other one really wanted to be doing virtual school, but he was too little. So I was like pinning my one kid into the chair and hiding off the Zoom camera so they didn't see me pinning my ADHD kid into a chair in the kitchen while my 3-year-old is like being schooled by Elmo and Daniel Tiger by himself in the living room, and my husband is going to work every day. And it was like, well, shit, I'm gonna lose my freaking mind. Like I need to talk to other people. And my husband would come home from work after talking to people all day at work and peopling, and he's like, I can't people anymore. Right? He comes home and I'm like, oh my God, I have to have full sentences and talk to somebody. And he's like, please stop talking to me. I can't. And I didn't quite realize like how much I relied on being connected to other people and being out of my house and going to events and networking with people and just seeing my friends and having that energy, somewhere to put it. Because I'm also a performer and we play music and we play in bands and stuff like that, and do poetry readings and whatnot. And I wasn't able to do any of that either. So I started doing like online open mics, and I was like, okay, this is better. Like I'm getting some of this energy out somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like finding people on Instagram and doing Instagram lives and putting more of me and my experience in my life out there, and then starting this podcast was like the thing that made me not go insane during COVID, because I was like, I need people. How am I going to get people? How am I going to talk to people? And finding out that I had ADHD, and it was like, you know what? That makes so much sense for my whole entire life. I've had so many amazing conversations with people, and then 5 minutes later, I don't remember them. I was like, what if I record those great conversations so that I can enjoy them again, but then other people can also enjoy them? And that's really the whole impetus for the show really getting started, because I was like, I know all these great people and I've heard of all these great people, and there's more people in the world who need to know about what they're doing. And when, like you said, people out there don't realize how alone they feel until they see somebody else who is like, they can relate to, and they're like, wow, I thought I was the only one that felt that way. But turns out you're not. And so finding a way to make an avenue for people to find each other and connect with other people and be slightly inspired, hopefully, it is great. I think it's great. So I don't know.
That was a lot of cool stuff to unpack. I'm not gonna lie. Like again, this is why I think content creation and podcasts and things are important, because the residual empathy that you get out of these situations is so important. You said you were talking about like your husband coming home and like being peopled out, right? Like that struggle, because my wife and I went through something similar. Her name's Liz. Liz and I went through something similar where there was periods of time where I worked from home. I was working and the children were home because they were both in like daycare-esque ages. And she worked a full-time job in an office. And we had both had those roles either as they were or switched before. So we both knew exactly what it was like to be the office person and to be the home with kids person. And, off the cuff, there's no great answer for that situation, which is I've been at home with the kids all day. If I don't talk to another human being that is older than 5, I'm going to freak out. And if I don't get a break, I'm going to freak out. And then the other person that comes home says, I can't just switch and upgrade my hard simultaneously. And you have two people that are like desperate for either some sort of change, right? And neither can provide that simultaneously. That's rough. That kind of stuff needs talked about. And when you said that, I almost like blocked it out of my mind because that was like a COVID moment, right? I had totally forgot like that hell that I went through. It wasn't the girl's fault at all. They had nothing to do with it. It was the environment that I was in, that she was in when it was her turn to do that kind of thing. That's not normal to not be aware that other people experience that, you know? And when you I consider myself to be an extroverted person, or at least I used to. And I know there's some people out there that say that extroverts and introverts aren't real things, that we're all a mix of one or the other. I personally don't believe that. I do think, however, that there is liquidity to it and that you don't have to remain one forever. I used to be an extroverted person all the time. My circle of friends was 100 strong. And then I became a dad, and then I got sober, and then I was married. All those things happened. And that reduced my circle of friends, which made that my contact with people less frequent. And then I became a content creator. So a lot of my social expenditure came from talking to people and then like receiving en masse thousands of responses from people that I didn't necessarily want to talk to. I enjoy talking to people online, but I don't enjoy talking to thousands of people. Nobody is programmed to talk to thousands of people on an individual basis, right? That's not normal for a human being to do. So when you go from having all this free time and being able to talk to whoever you want, down to having responsibilities that require you to be with specific people for very long periods of time, and then in content creation, you're talking to thousands of people and receiving thousands of interactions back. COVID hits, and now the chances for you to go out and interact with people that you actually know and want to spend time with decreases. All those things I think can chip away at someone that is inherently extroverted like I was. I consider myself a very loud introvert at this point. I purposely cancel plans very frequently. I purposely don't schedule plans very frequently. I find myself avoiding people most of the time, just to spend time with the 2 or 3 people most important to me outside of my wife and my children. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and I feel that struggle that you went through, because I went from kind of this free reign social life to almost like it's a muscle that I didn't exercise for so long that like atrophied,
Hmm.
it. And I think that's important to know, that if you don't have access to do the things that make that portion of your brain happy, I think it can change who you are as a person.
Hmm.
So I totally understand that struggle, because if it's like not something that you can access on a regular basis, it will drive you insane. It really will.
It totally, and it's funny because I didn't realize like how much I missed like having potlucks at my house, and like, and
Hmm.
having a handful of people and their kids come over. Everybody brings some food. You can make a little bit of food. You don't have to make a huge meal or whatever. And just talking to other parents in person. And I didn't realize
Hmm.
like how much I was like, damn, that, fills my cup a lot. And so I recently just this past week, I was like, you know what? I don't care. Let's do it. I was like, anybody who can come over on Friday or whatever, bring some food. And we actually did one on Friday and Saturday after I'd been out of town for like 6 days. I came back and was like, let's do this with no plans whatsoever. But it was great. It was great just because I was like, my house is a disaster and so is yours, and it's fine. And here's a bunch of food. Let's eat pizza or whatever. Somebody always brings something that is, less healthy than what you made, and somebody else always brings something that's more healthy than what you made. And then all together, you got like a nice round meal, and it was great. Um,
What state are you out of?
New York.
Okay, I didn't know what flavor of potluck we were dealing with here.
Which state are you out of?
Kentucky.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
My dad's family's from Kentucky. I had I
yeah,
had I had some great aunts, great Aunt Homa and great Aunt Rudell down from Kentucky. And they made some amazing.
yeah. You
Oh
said Rudell, and I was like, "Well, she ain't lying. That's the truth."
Mm-hmm. Oh, who was the Lurley? I had great Aunt Lurley from Kentucky.
Literally,
Mhm.
that's a very Appalachian name for
Yeah.
sure.
Yes. Okay, so I want to make sure that we have some more time to talk about getting sober and why that's super important to you in your life journey and whatnot.
Oh man, that's a lot. That's a lot. I don't even know where to begin. So, wow. So here's the thing about sobriety, right? There are people that will live by it every single day. Not being sober. I'm not talking about they'll decide to remain sober every single day. I'm talking about they're in it. Like they're going to meetings every single day. They're volunteering to do all of the sobriety events. They're constantly recruiting new sponsees to help go through AA programs. They're always going to different inpatient clinics to help the people that are really in the throes of withdrawal and addiction. There are people that are in it, and then there are like more casual people that have recovered and are still participating in some level, where it's either extremely minimal amounts, or just the average kind of person that's living sobriety and tells people about it every now and then. uh, Unless you were like in it, and someone says to you, "Tell me all about your sobriety," there's this moment where it all rushes back all at once. All the things that I forgot about, the things that I've done before, the things that I did to get to where I needed to be. Um, it's so much information. Uh, I really appreciate when someone asks me that question, because now after this call, or after this podcast, I'm going to kind of sit with that for a while, because it's been a while since somebody's asked me that question. Most people I talk to already know in some capacity. But I started drinking from an early age, like 15, 16. Um, it was, little things, a beer here. Again, I'm in Kentucky, so it's like, hey, David's probably old enough. Let's let him try the moonshine we made. You know what I mean? Like that's a real thing. That's not just like a Kentucky stereotype. We
Mhm.
make moonshine, we consume it. Like we do that. It's at family gatherings, it's in the back room somewhere. Um, and they warned me. They said, you have a history of alcoholism in your family. It's gonna happen if you don't watch out. And you just all you know about alcoholics is that they drink a lot. You don't know anything else about them, especially when you're younger. So you
Mhm.
just don't care. You just don't care. I was in high school. I was going to high school parties. I was loving the way it was making me feeling. I was going to college parties. I was in college now. That is almost a requirement, especially as a music student, which I was. That was like there was so much initiation to being kind of the bleeding heart artistic type that drank with all of his artistic friends, you know. And then at some point, it just wasn't a party anymore. I was failing college, which half of that was my choice anyway. I didn't really prefer college. I was passing my music classes, but failing everything else. And then soon I wasn't doing good in music either. So I left college and had a roommate that was really good to me, and he drank with me. Everybody drank with me. It's not their responsibility to determine how alcoholic I am or not. They just knew that I drank a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and all these little signs. The big thing that I noticed during addiction, and eventually, just general alcoholism and alcoholic behavior would turn to anything. I would do any drug, anything I could find at all. If it was a Sunday and nobody had a way to get me anything, I'd go to the gas station and buy caffeine pills and snort caffeine pills if that was a choice. Like that. And even people I was with that in my mind I saw as like lesser than because I had come from like a middle upper class family and, generally just found myself I was well spoken. I had a good vocabulary. So, when I hung out with people that I might have considered to be lesser than when those people, were like, damn, dude, what was that? Like, why did you just do that? Um, Again, you kind of have to be numb to that stuff when you're trying to live a life in addiction, right? Decisions that I made that I would later regret, just unspeakable stuff that if I said it here, people would be like, I don't know if I like that guy anymore. You know what I mean? Things about myself from the past that are nowhere even close to who I am today.
Mhm.
Decisions that I made and ways that I chose to live my life. Um, those don't happen overnight. Those are small moral and ethical decisions that you choose to lower yourself to. And the big thing that pushes you to be able to continue your addiction is to say, well, at least I'm not that guy. At least I'm not, at least I'm not the guy that does drugs. And then when you do, you say, well, at least I'm not the guy that's like begging for stuff. And then you are. And eventually you don't have a lower, you don't have a less a less enjoyable experience to compare yourself to where you can say, well, at least I'm not doing that.
Mhm.
Because eventually I didn't have any more examples. I was like, everybody's doing better than me. Literally everybody. The only thing that I'm not is stuck in a clinic somewhere because they forced me to be in there.
Mhm.
um And that continued for quite some time until I had children. And when I had kids with my now wife, I had cut out a majority of like really hard stuff because I'll be honest with you, not because like I decided now is the time that I'm going to be a good dad, because it was impractical. I didn't have the time. I didn't like people harping on me and getting in my way. That's another big thing with addiction is that the decisions that you make to do, how deep in the throes of addiction you are, will determine how much shit you're willing to take from other people about your behavior. You know, if you're like really close to being like on the brink of your lowest of your lows, you don't care what anybody says about anything. You'll cheat, lie, steal, anyone. But I was a little higher functioning than that. I was doing a little bit better off than that. I still had enough self-awareness that I wanted people to like me. I did care about people, so I didn't want people upset with me. So part of that was having to shape up some, when kids were on the way. But I was still drinking very heavily. And I would do all kinds of crazy stuff because at that point it was like, how can I show that I can be responsible and functional and people don't have to worry about me? That was my main concern. I didn't want people to worry about me or be concerned for me because that ruins everything. I don't get to drink anymore if people have concerns for me, right? And with kids on the way, that's when people keep an eye on you. So I would do things like, my wife would have alcohol in the house and I would drink all of it in one night and then fill it up with water because she doesn't drink hardly ever. She drinks very occasionally. So I would drink it all, fill it up with water, and know that I had enough time between now and payday because I didn't have any more money. If I had money, I would have just bought my own, but I didn't. I spent it all on alcohol. So I have enough time between now and payday that I can pass this water off as alcohol, because she would mark it at the top. If she had a bottle, she would mark it here. So I would drink it and then fill it up with water to the mark line, right? That's the kind of logic you have as an addict. And then when payday came around, I would just empty it out and then pour in the new alcohol and I probably thought that was real smart. I probably thought I was real clever doing that, you know? That's where you get to. You get to the point where you have these little schemes and little plans, and you think that you're in control of everything. You think that you're doing just fine, whatever that means at the time, whatever just fine means. And there was a fight that my wife and I got to. This was like fast forward a few years. And again, I'm like gradually trying to I don't have a choice. I have kids, they're maturing, they're getting to be like two and a half, whatever, one of them's a newborn. And I'm trying to find a way to manage my habit and keep it around. And again, just keep myself off of everyone else's radar. And it's getting harder. Because your addiction, your habits do not go back the other direction. It doesn't work like that. So it got to the point where I had a fight with my wife because I wasn't coming home. I was out with a coworker drinking, and I got mad and just left and got really drunk and passed out on a friend's couch. Because in my brain, that's what Dave did from ages 16 to 20, 21 when he wanted to avoid problems, right? So I was like, I'll just do that because that's what I'm used to doing. That's not the parental mindset. That's not thinking like a parent, And again, I did stuff with my kids. We went to Easters and we went to fun, places for little toddlers and babies to go. And I took family photos. I was, for what it's worth, for what I could have been, I was a good dad. But there was, again, this whole other life that I was trying to fit in. And I remember I left, I got drunk, and then I woke up to a picture of my oldest standing ready for not kindergarten. She was much younger, ready for daycare. And she had on these really long, crazy socks. And they were mismatched, and one of them was higher than the other one. And she had sent me a picture and said, this is your daughter. It's crazy sock day today. She was really excited to show you this morning, but you weren't here. That destroyed me because I like to think of myself as fun and goofy, and I miss that. And she was there for it. She wasn't a newborn anymore. I had a newborn, but she wasn't 6 months old anymore. She was 2 or however old she was. She wanted me to be there for that, and she was present for it, but I wasn't. I let her down, right? So that's what started recovery. That's what started recovery for me. And it was immediate. I came home that day, and my wife said, something's got to give. And I said, it's already done. Today, start tomorrow or whenever the next meeting is, that's when I start. So that's when I did. I went through recovery I went through AA, which there's tons of way that you can recover. I chose AA because it was a simple, direct method for me. And there was a little local church down the street. It's not a religious program, but they happen to use churches as a place to congregate sometimes. And there was a church down the street that I could walk to. At this point, I already had 2 DUIs. I was using a breathalyzer to start my car every morning. It was wild. It was a wild time for me. And, I don't hide all this stuff, but I don't broadcast it either, like the gritty details. But I certainly don't mind to tell people, because a lot of people look at me and they're like, wow, you're the best dad ever. I wish I had you as a dad. I'm like, you wish you had me as a dad now. That's why recovery is so important to me, because the person who I was then and the person who I am now would have never spoken to each other. Not in a million years. And that all happened through AA and peer support, finding people that were willing to, take me on as a sponsee, finding people that were willing to give me advice, finding people that were willing to give me rides. The people in my life that were willing to stick around and still be there for me as my peers, that I'd already had in my life. I relied on other people for so long that when it was time for recovery, I had to do it just one more time. I had to just rely on people one more time to be there for me, to let me find the dad and husband and friend and son and brother that I needed to be. Right. And that's what they gave me. They gave me those chances, and I took them and made good by them. And that's why I had such a strong support of peer support. There, no ultimatums, no scary, moments in life. I mean, there were times that I would just wake up blackout in random places with random people doing random things dangerously, and none of that was ever a wake-up call. But having those people around made a huge difference. That's what actually struck the chord, was hearing other people's stories and knowing that, the guy that just said that he did unspeakable acts under a bridge to score wine, and the wasp mom over there, that's worth 3 times what I am. We all have the same story, relatively speaking. They call it same elevator, different floors, but you're all going to the bottom. That's what peer support was. It was proof to me that my situation was not special at all. And I needed to hear that. And it made a world of difference. I've been sober ever since. It's been fantastic. I've got everything back and more. And I owe that to the people that showed me I wasn't alone in that.
That's awesome. How long have you been sober?
Over 4 years. I don't know an exact date. I should know. I had a sobriety date at one point. It was February something or another. I can't remember what. And then I had a a bit of a slip up. It was a relapse, but in my mind, I told myself that it wasn't. So then I told my sponsor, I said, well, I don't know. I had this thing happen, but I don't really consider it a relapse. And he was like, okay. He's like, sure, if that sounds good to you, that sounds good to me. And he knew what he did. For that moment on, it planted a seed that he was like, you need to change that shit, dude, is what he was saying, basically, but he didn't want to say it out loud. So my new sobriety date is June or July 15th or something. So 4 or 5 years. Honestly, I'm kind of glad that I don't know for sure. Because I was so focused on the numbers for a while. I'm 6 months sober, I'm 8 months sober, I'm 13.86 months sober, that now I can just kind of focus on being sober, and living the life that I geared up so hard to get to. But yeah, it's every summer, and I'm over 4 years sober now. So
that's awesome. I love hearing stories like this. It gives me hope, because I have never been addicted to really anything except other people. I've definitely had addictions to certain people. And my mother was addicted to cigarettes, and I mean, when she was trying to quit, I remember her like smelling cigarette butts out of an ashtray. And I was like, I can't even imagine like being at that point where you want something that is so terrible for you, so bad that you will literally like
Yeah.
smell cigarette butts that have been in an ashtray for like months. Um, but it gives me hope that for a lot of the people in my life who are still struggling with addiction, that they will find that point where they're like, I'm missing it, you know, I'm causing this. And I used to date a guy who was an addict, and like you were saying, I mean, he was definitely at the bottom. Like when he would lie for anybody, steal from anybody. He stole my
Yeah.
car in the middle of the night and did drugs in it and stole all the money out of my purse. And then I got up in the morning and went to work and realized I had no money in my purse and there was like drug shit all over my car. And
Yeah.
I came home on my lunch break and I was like, get the fuck out of my house. Like, I'm done with this. And I hope that that was the wake up call for him. I'm not even sure if it was. But that relationship I had with him was one of those things where I just kept saying, like, why do you keep making these decisions? Why do you keep doing this? And he said, the person who's doing that isn't me. It's somebody else. And I would always just come back and like, but it is you, you know, like it might not feel like it's you, but it's still you deciding to do those things every day. And the only person who can decide not to do those things is you. And so it gives me hope that even though I'm not with him anymore and haven't been with him for a very, very long time, that he will find that point. And I hope he did.
Yeah. And it's that's really important to know, is that I appreciate you saying I hope that he will or does or has, because everyone, there are so many people that will get into recovery and they'll try to get sober and then they will relapse and then they never come back and then they die, because they think that they tried, they failed, and their membership has been revoked. The sobriety chance is gone. Your sobriety journey is whatever it took you to get sober. So whatever your rock bottom is, if your rock bottom is getting a text that your daughter wanted you to see Crazy Sock Day one time, and that's what that took, great. If your rock bottom is the fourth time that you've had to be resuscitated with Narcan, that's your rock bottom. And you say, you know what? I don't want to die a fifth time. So I think this time is the time that I'm actually going to get sober. And now you live a life of sobriety. That's it then. I highly value telling your true story and all of its lows, especially if you relapse, because if everyone had the same story of I came in, I realized my life wasn't what it should be, so I changed it the first time, perfection. There
Right.
would be so many people that never tried to get sober or, relapse and then gave up because they're like, well, I didn't do it like they did it. Nobody else, everyone says that my story isn't unique, but nobody else seems to go, everyone else seems to do recovery just fine.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know that sometimes recovery sucks real hard and that you fail several times. And by fail, I mean you just delay what you deserve, not actual failure. So that's, I appreciate that because true recovery is the same, but it hardly ever looks the same.
Mm-hmm. I really like that idea of it can be applied to so many things in life too. Just like if you fail at something the first time, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to do it again. And I love that, it's not the end, it's just delaying what you deserve. And I love that. I love that. I want to make sure we have some time to talk about WhiteFlag, and then it's 5-question time at the end. So do you want to tell everyone a little bit about WhiteFlag and what it is and why it's awesome?
Yeah. So during content creation, I was reached out to by this tiny little company that they were just starting up. They'd only been around maybe a year, called WhiteFlag. And they were like, listen, we're trying to grow our community because we offer anonymous peer support. It's like an app where you can, immediately I was like, I don't do mental health apps because they're all the same. It's all this paywall to get to a therapist. They charge by the character, whatever. They're all the same. There's enough resources like that. I don't need to promote another one. I'm already beating the other ones off with the stick. And they're like, no, it's not like that. It's free to get in, it's free to use. There are no therapists, there are no professionals, there are no call center agents, there are no trained volunteers, there are no, it's not a one-way street. It's just a space for people to find each other anonymously and share connections about the things that they struggle with. That's what WhiteFlag was, and that's what they told me. And I was like, well, that's much different then. So I looked on the app, and that's exactly what it was. You log into the app, and you select things about yourself that you struggle with, whether it's PTSD, anxiety, depression, trauma. It doesn't matter. The list is dozens and dozens of things long. Things that you struggle with, things that identify who you are. If you're a veteran, if you're trans, if you're an amputee, whatever it is, there are things about you that describe who you are. And you can raise your white flag to say to the rest of the app, hey, I need help. Whether it's I'm having a panic attack or I'm just feeling kind of lonely today, a little bit. There's no requirement for flag raising, right? It's whenever you need to talk to someone, or you can answer a flag. So if you ever feel like you're in a good headspace, or you feel like maybe even if you're not, and just helping someone else will put you in a good headspace, you can answer a flag that's already been raised. That was the concept of the app. I loved it. I worked with them on several videos, and they said, we like what you do. And I said, well, I like what you do. So I stuck around with them ever since. I'm now their chief content officer, and it's what I live and breathe every day. Peer support is what saved me from being a version of myself that I couldn't stand. And from that point forward, I said, whatever I can do to make sure that people are aware of what peer support can do for them, I'm going to do it. And then WhiteFlag just fell in my lap. And I said, this is exactly what I was talking about. So now that's what I do. I promote WhiteFlag in any way possible.
I love it. I love when the universe shows up. Like you put something out there like, man, I would really like to be able to make a difference in this way. And the universe is like, here, dude, you can have this. It's like,
yes, exactly.
You know, the more you look for that stuff, you put it out there in the universe, like this is what my next step should be. And I've, if you go back and watch a lot of the other episodes, I typically talk a lot more about my own crazy experiences. I've been through a lot of crazy trauma. I'm currently writing a memoir about my insane life. But super long story short, like in the span of before I turned 30, I lived with a hoarder. I had 5 different parents and was shuffled from one house to the next every week. I lived in 3 houses every week. I had 7 brothers and sisters, but I was an only child between my mom and my dad because they were married to other people when I was born. And I came out of that and went away to college. My mom died when I was 20 years old on Friday the 13th. And then my dorm burnt to the ground with all of my shit in it on her birthday while I was in it. And then and then they cut my financial aid for my senior year of school because I couldn't put her on my FAFSA anymore.
Oh, you got a lot going on.
Yeah,
you would fit right in on the team, actually.
This is all before I could legally drink, right? So like I was like a straight up adult by the time I was like, but I mean, even just the way I grew up at my mom's house as a kid, I was cooking myself dinner when I was 6 because she worked 5 part-time jobs and she was like not home. It was like my brother who was 3 years older than me, and we lived in this crazy house. And there was only like 2 friends who were allowed to come over because if anyone else knew the way that our house looked, they would take us away.
Right.
And that kind of stuff. So like growing up in that atmosphere where I was like parenting myself, but also parenting my mom, who I now know had very serious ADHD and other mental health problems, severe depression, never had health insurance, was never medicated for any of it, and rode the struggle bus hard as hell. And like nobody knew that. She was really good at just showing up as her weird ass self in public and then going back into her hidey hole. And like her whole house was crazy, where she had like a prepaid 4-year subscription to Entertainment Weekly, but like we had our gas shut off like on the regular, like that kind of stuff. Just like she just sucked at adulting really bad. And so growing up in that, and then having all this stuff happen to me in college and inheriting her house that was falling apart while I was going to college 1,000 miles away and had no money to continue going to school. And I was just, every day I would get up and be like, where is the cancer in the bus that's coming to run me over? Like, who is making a fucked up movie about my life right now?
Right.
And other shitty things happened since then. Like my brother passed away from cancer like 2.5 years after he came back from Iraq. 5 weeks before he was supposed to get married. Had to cancel his whole entire wedding and got married in the chapel at the hospital. And 2 days later was in a coma for the rest of his life. It was like,
oh, no.
Seriously? Come on. And the first time I talked to a therapist and I was like, how many hours do you have for me to like get you caught up to where I'm at right now in my life? And after 3 or 4 sessions, she goes, it's remarkable that you're even remotely functional as an adult right now, right? And it hadn't even occurred to me that, if any one of those things had happened to somebody else, they would be struggling. And I was so good at being that superhero, right? That I was like, none of this stuff bothers me. I can handle any of it, blah, 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 right? Like, I don't cry in front of people. I don't do that shit. I'm cool. I got it, right? Like, I would just let so many things just roll off my back and not, that other thing that happened was worse than this. So that thing that just happened doesn't really matter, right? And that's the thing that I have to like push back against all the time. Is that like, I need to not say like, oh, that's okay. It's not as bad as this other thing I already dealt with. Like I just lost my dad, right? The day after Christmas, this past year. And even now, like I still find myself saying like, oh, well, it wasn't as shitty as when my mom died when I was like 20. I got to have 20 more years with my dad than I had with my mom. So it's not that bad. And I wasn't as close to him as I was to my mom. So it's not that bad. And now I keep thinking about his wife gave me his pepper grinder. And like one of the things with my dad when we were little, well, when I was little, was like he used to cook a lot. And so I definitely remember him like grinding pepper from this pepper grinder, like onto the salad or onto whatever cooking and stuff like that. And seeing that pepper grinder in my kitchen, like that's the thing that I'm like, it's not okay. It's not okay. I see it there. I haven't been able to bring myself to like pull the little thing out of the bottom and fill it with new pepper so I can use it. Like I'm not there yet. And I think that like letting people know that it's okay to not be okay is a huge deal for the world. Like I had a friend, I met him right before I lost my mom, like, I don't know, a month and a half, 2 months before that. And he was the first person in my entire life at 20 years old to say, how you doing after that happened? And I was like, oh, I'm okay. I'm okay. And he just looks right at me and he's like, you're not okay. And that's okay. And when he first said it, it didn't hit me right. And I remember like, a week later, I go home, I open the door to my room, my mom's purse is on my bed. And all of a sudden it was like, that was the thing that made it very real. And, I'm not going to lie, I smoked a lot of weed back then, like a lot. And so it was easy to make it not feel real because I was a little bit somewhere else most of the time, I wasn't using weed to, provide physical pain relief. I was using it to escape. And that experience of walking in the door and saying, holy shit, it's real. I'm not okay. I picked up the phone and I called him up and I said, you know how you said it's okay to not be okay? He's like, yeah. I'm like, I'm definitely not okay. And having him say, his first response, do you want me to come there? Do you want me to get on a bus, a Greyhound bus, and be there overnight and leave school for a week and come hang out with you and be there? And having that support of somebody who had lost a parent, somebody who knew what that was like and knew that it was okay, and not saying, oh, you're grieving, that shit's fucking awkward. I don't really want you to cry. I don't want you to not be okay. I just want to shove those feelings under the rug for you. I want to convince you that whatever you're feeling isn't right. To have somebody be like, all of the things you're feeling right now are totally valid and I'm here for it. Like, there is no replacement for having that role in your life for somebody. So the fact that you have this app that provides that for people who don't have those people in their life or don't necessarily know that the people in their lives could be those people or don't want to quote unquote burden those people that they do have in their lives, because so many people that struggle with any kind of mental health issues are the common thread that you hear all the time is, I don't want to burden somebody. I don't want to bother somebody with my problems. I don't want to do that. And having this whole app full of people who are like, I need help. And also people who are like, I can give help, I think is fucking amazing. I think it's so
Me
great.
too.
The fact that it's free, like legit. What? Oh my God.
And it's what does it say that there's an it's okay to not be okay? The fact that that is a saying as common as like got milk, like what does that say? When it's either you need to be tougher, you need to not burden other people, or I promise that you're actually fine. Which I mean, those three, common zingers that get tossed out to people enough. What does it say that there's literally a catchphrase that we use to let people know that it is acceptable to not be in a good state? That's okay to not be okay. That's peculiar to me. That's why WhiteFlag exists. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And that's why I did it, because I was like, I liked the saying. It was good. It was good that people knew. But now that they know, what do? They go pay for therapists. So many people don't even have insurance. That's why I was about it. Was like you said, it's cool that it's free because people need an actionable, easy resource. That's what was important.
Yeah. And I think for me, part of why I started this podcast in the first place was to share people's struggles and say, I really had this huge dream of what I wanted to do with my life. And, it wasn't like I woke up tomorrow and it happened, right? Like most people who are like, oh, I want to reach the world, don't start a TikTok and immediately go viral like you, right? Like most people are like, I struggle really hard, right? Like trying to do the things that bring me joy. And or feel like they don't even deserve to do those things that bring them joy, right? They don't deserve to get paid to do something they love. And I wanted to share the stories of people who were out in the world doing something amazing, affecting change, bringing art to life. So I interview all these people who are entrepreneurs and artists and activists and writers and musicians, and they're like, it's super fucking hard, but it's still worth it. And to share those stories of like, I started in this place and I never thought I would get there. And maybe there isn't a top of the mountain, but like I'm getting there. And here's how I'm getting there. And it always brings me to why I want to do 5-question time at the end of the show, because having this conversation with people, if you have a really like a pre-scripted interview and you're like, I have these questions I want to ask this person. If you haven't had like a give and take conversation with somebody beforehand, people are way less likely to be open and vulnerable and honest with their answers than if they feel like they already know you. And so that's why I set up my show like this. Like most of my episodes are longer than the typical podcast episode. Somebody was like, podcasts should never be longer than 20 minutes. I'm like, well, fuck off. My podcast is going to be way longer than 20 minutes. Like, oh, well, if you only want to watch 20 minutes at a time, that's on you. Like,
yeah, I talk too much.
like I'm a big fan of like long, meaningful conversations with people. And, sometimes you could have a 5-minute conversation that changes your life. And I find that a longer conversation is more likely to change more people's lives. And I know that a single moment has the power to change somebody's life forever. Like you getting that photograph, like you getting that text message with that picture. That's that moment. And you're like,
right.
Everything is totally different right now. And I know how powerful that can be. Like, I know what it feels like to wake up at 4:00 in the morning and see a fucking fire as high as you could possibly see into the sky. Like, those moments happen for people every day, but you never know when like a video you put on Instagram or a video that you put on TikTok is the thing that somebody is watching when they're thinking about taking their life, and they watch it and then they don't. Like, you never know. You might never, ever know how many people have those reactions to something. And I think as long as what you're putting out into the world has the intention to like be positive and affect positive change, like that's all we can do, right?
Word. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay. So I know that I want to be mindful of your time because you have a whole at-home work day while your kids are at school, just like I do. So we're gonna do this pretty quick. So it's 5-question time. As you can see, a little ADHD me this is my fidget toy for the day.
I've been playing under the desk this whole time, so don't worry.
Yeah. I have many of them on my desk. Okay, so number 1, you already kind of talked about this, but you could tell a different story if you want. Tell me about an experience or a single moment that shaped who you are today.
Yes, I threw out so many whoppers. I'm having to like go back through it because it's like there's like this mindset for recovery, right? That recovery is important. It was important for me. But there were lots of other things that I think weren't as generally affected, you know. Oh, there's there's been several. I think one was uh I lost my grandfather, and it was like it wasn't super tragic. It wasn't unexpected. He was old with cancer, like it was expected. And I was young. I was like 12 or 11. And I remember like they asked several times, "Do you want to go see him? Do you want to go see him?" And I would always say no because I generally knew what he was going to look like, what he was going to sound like. They warned me that he might not know who I was. And I said no for my own reasons because I was like, well, I don't want to ruin the memory that I have of him. Right. And then once he was gone, um, I was like, that was dumb. I kind of wish I hadn't have done that. So I think in that moment, that was the moment that I learned to appreciate death a little bit more, and life too. Because it was like Grandpa wouldn't have given two shits if he had seen me or not because he was not in that place. But it was selfish of me to myself, because I think ultimately I would have appreciated it more than not seeing him and keeping like an undefeated record of not seeing Grandpa in that state. Had I
Mhm.
just seen him before he had gone, that would have been more important to me. So I think in that moment I had like learned to appreciate life and death a little bit more, I think.
I totally feel that. I think my brother probably feels that way about our grandmother because she was old and had cancer. And I went to visit her relatively often. And he didn't. And I think he probably feels that way. That he was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I don't want to see her like that, blah blah. I don't want her to see me sad or whatever." Um, and it was after my mom had died, our mom had died. And so I knew, like, I wish that I had had time to visit my mom in the time between, like, when I knew she was going to die and when she died. Like, I did it. And I was like, what a gift, to be able to go and
Right.
talk to her and ask her those things that I had been avoiding asking her. And say, this is my chance. If I don't ask her, I'm going to be pissed, that I didn't do it. So I think that's really great advice too.
For sure.
Not to avoid the things that are hard and sad, and that the end of someone's life is still part of their life, right? Like,
Yeah. It
makes
has its own value for sure.
it makes a difference for them and for you. And there's a lot of times when people are dying that they don't want people to come see them. They don't want people to see them that way. But then they realize that, when someone comes to see you like that and they do love you and they are giving you that connection, that they realize that it doesn't matter how you look. It matters how you show up. So,
Yeah.
okay, number two. When you feel defeated or overcome, what do you tell yourself to keep going?
Oh, I cycle through several things because at most of the time things like what a personal trainer might say to you doesn't work for me. I don't really respond to like aggressive motivation. You know what I mean? So like if I were to ever do like CrossFit, they'd have to push me really hard in a really gentle way. Even when I was in AA, my first thought was, I need to find a girl sponsor because I hang out with girls more than hang out with guys, and they don't do that. You have to have a guy sponsor if you're a dude. But I think what has been sticking with me more recently, and it's almost contrary to what you were saying before about not subjecting yourself to feeling like you're not allowed to be upset because of your previous experiences.
Mhm.
It's almost like the healthy version of that thing that you avoid, which
Mhm.
is I made a video about it recently where it's like I just need to remind myself that I have done extremely hard things. Not that this thing isn't valid that I'm going through, not that this thing isn't difficult, not that it's okay, or that it isn't okay to struggle with it. But I certainly won't tell myself that I'm not capable of it.
Mm-hmm.
I came from the throes of addiction to every substance known to man, except for like one honorable mention. So if I tell myself that I can't lose 50 pounds, that feels a little absurd to me, knowing what I had previously overcome. So I think for me, it's again, it's just reminding myself, you have done, you have escaped unspeakable difficulties. Um, this is not compared to that. It's not even close. You're allowed to think it's hard, but don't think it's impossible.
I love that. That's such a good reminder for me too. And it just reminds me of something that I say to my kids all the time. I say, in the grand scheme of life, this is a small thing.
Yes.
You know, it seems huge now, but 1 year of your life seems huge now. And when you're 40, it's going to be like, whoop, like,
Yeah.
you know, like it's not always going to seem so big.
Something that helps is try to imagine yourself as, when you think back to a really shitty time, you currently in your position talking to me now, imagine like your state of being, how you feel. Imagine almost like a pity that you feel for past you. When I'm in those hard moments, I try to imagine what it feels like to be future me thinking about how shitty this moment is.
Mm-hmm.
Like there will be a time, a future you that remembers how shitty this is. Imagine what that feels like to look back at current me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like your happy place at the beach on the ocean, but my happy place is the me that doesn't have to deal with what I'm currently dealing with.
Oh, I love this show. Okay, number 3. Tell me about a way that you overcame a failure or a mistake and what you learned from it.
Oh, um, there was I'm writing a children's book, right? And there was this period of time where I told myself that I can't tell anybody that I'm doing it, because when I tell people that I'm doing stuff, I stop doing it. Maybe it's getting enough juice from the dopamine of letting people know that I'm doing stuff, that I don't need to actually do the thing or whatever it is. But I didn't tell people about the book for the longest time. And then I decided, you know what? No, fuck that. I'm going to tell people about the book. So I made a couple videos where I like shared poems from the book. It's a children's poetry book. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I love that. I can't wait to see it. And then it disappeared for like 2 years. And in my mind, I mean, how many years have to pass by of not writing the book that you said you were going to write before it's a failure, right? So in my mind, I said that was a failure. I said I was going to do a book and then I didn't do it, like many things that I say I'm going to do and then don't do. And again, I just took the time to remember it's only a failure if you commit to never doing it again. If you try to climb a mountain and you don't climb it today, that's just added experience for the time you will eventually climb the mountain. The only time that you have failed climbing the mountain is when you commit that you 100% promise you are never climbing the mountain again. Mm-hmm. If you hadn't climbed the mountain before, there you go. You can say that you failed at that, right? I never said that I wasn't, not going to write the book. So I had to remind myself this was part of the journey to the book writing. It doesn't have to be fast to be successful. It doesn't have to be on time to be successful. Most of my things that are successful aren't on time.
Word.
So that was, again, I almost cheated with your question because you said, what did you learn from a failure? I learned from a failure that it wasn't a failure at all. That true failure comes from your decision to no longer do something ever again in your entire life for as long as you live. Mm-hmm. That's a long time to commit to not doing something. So unless you just decide that it's not worth your time anymore, it doesn't have to be now. It doesn't have to be in 5 years. It's just in progress for a long time. That's all.
I love that. My mom was a poet too, and she sucked at adulting, but she was so great at human relations. And one of the things that she used to always tell me about writing is that she's like, writing can never go bad, but it can always get better. And she's like, if you're writing something and you don't know where it's going to go next, or you don't like it, or it didn't quite capture what you were trying to do, she's like, throw it in a drawer, put it away somewhere. You're going to find it again sometime and say, wow, now I know what to do with this. And
Absolutely.
I've noticed too that like I write poems more than I write full books and essays and things like that. For me, it's quicker, it's easier. I feel really accomplished when I'm like, oh, I did that, cool. I got the one done, it's good. And having like an outlet to say, if I haven't finished it yet, it's because the thing I need to finish it hasn't happened yet to me.
It's just not done yet. That's
Yeah.
right.
Like
Yes.
the life experience, the lesson, that conversation I needed to have, I didn't have yet. The thing that's gonna, round out the end of the book, or the moral that's gonna pull that story together, or the thing that's gonna inspire me to say, now I'm ready to do this. It hasn't happened yet. So, just because it's in a drawer or in a Google Drive or wherever, because like this is a different world,
Right.
right? Doesn't mean that you're not going to do it someday. Okay, number 4. What one trait or habit is most responsible for keeping you on track?
Keeping me on track. I want to call it loyalty. I was gonna choose the word like hyperfixation or passion or dedication, but ultimately I think it's loyalty to whatever it is. I have a loyalty to WhiteFlag and Johnny McCoy, the guy who founded WhiteFlag. I have a loyalty to his cause and what he's doing. It's when I don't feel like working, it's what pulls me back into what we're doing. When I, you know, receive a job offer that's worth 5 times the amount of salary, you know what I mean? Like, I never consider it anyway, but it's the loyalty that causes that. Everything that I've ever really committed to doing really well has come from a sense of loyalty to something. In a lot of cases, it was loyalty to myself, because I had spent so much of my life being unfaithful, unloyal, dishonest to myself. I felt I had owed myself a few good years of commitment and loyalty to things that I wanted to do, considering how much I mistreated myself for a number of years. Um, and most people say that. People say, you're such a good worker, you're a great employee. It's because, you know, people will say, well, you could go somewhere and get a better job here, or they should be paying you more, or they should do this. Maybe, but I just generally am good with loyalty, and I think that gets me by. That's what my mom taught me pretty frequently is to be loyal to the causes that you're working on, to the companies that you work for, whatever it is. Show some loyalty, and it'll get you far because you can typically teach anybody anything. There are very few things that you can't teach people. You can't really teach loyalty. That kind of comes with its own, with the people that it comes with. So for me, that was the irreplaceable quality, not how good I could do something or how fast, but if I was loyal to the people that were counting on me.
I love it. I love it. Okay, number 5. What's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten, and what advice would you give to other people?
Oh, goodness gracious. That question was because I've been asked that question before. That question was a lot easier when I was like a senior in high school because I
Right.
had received less advice, you know. And the older I get, the more advice that I get, and it always changes my answer. Um, I've received two. I'll tell you this: how good advice is only dependent on how well you can remember it. Um, so I have two that always stick out in my mind. My uncle once told me that if somebody ever offers you gum, take it. Um, and I'll never forget it because I didn't take it one time, and he said, "Your breath smells like shit." And I said, "Oh," he said, "Remember, if they offer you gum, take it." And so I always remember that now. But another one, there's been several. My grandfather had a lot of zingers in his time. And he said there were two that always stuck out to me. And I'm cheating here. I'm giving you three, but the two that actually matter to me are these two. He said the first one is somebody can tell you what to do or how to do it, but not both. And that may not always be true, but I think it's a good foundation for making sure that you keep your principles about you in some way. That it's important to have loyalty to people. It's important to be committed. It's important to have a good work ethic, but don't let people control everything that you do. Have some say in the way that you govern your own life. That was always important to me. And either you are rich enough to pay for it, or you are smart enough to do it yourself. My family originally came from poverty. They were one of seven. They shared bathwater. You were either rich enough to pay for it, or you were smart enough to do it yourself. There's no shame in being in either one. But if you're going to have to be one, which one's it going to be? That was important to me.
So I one thing I want to add that is not one of the 5 questions. I am curious, as a content creator, somebody who has hundreds of thousands of followers on your social media, for people out there who are like, yeah, once I get to 10,000, once I get to 100,000, then it'll be easier, then I'll have made it. Can you just give to people a little bit of light as to how, like, the follower count doesn't really matter, and just because somebody has 1 million followers doesn't mean that that's the thing that's paying all their bills and stuff like that? Because I think it's people see the follower count and it's just like instant, you see it and you're like, wow, that person must be famous or whatever, and like I think it's important to like kind of let people know a little bit about what it's like on the other side of that curtain.
You want to know a secret? The minute I don't have to do this anymore, I'm quitting. And that's not because I hate social media. That's not because I hate my followers. That's not because I hate my content. It's because this place, this profession, this environment has no end. There is nowhere that you can go where you will reach a point of resolution when it comes to social media and content. There is none. And if you are trying to grow, this is all going to sound very grim, but I promise you, I always encourage people to be content creators. Go for it. I think it's therapeutic for you. I think it's therapeutic for the people that follow you. I think you'll find out a lot about yourself. I think it makes you more creative. There are so many benefits to being a content creator, as long as you're smart, like about your paper trail and stuff. But some of the stuff I'll say will sound pretty grim. If you do, let's say your goal is 1 million followers. I promise you, between now and 1 million, by the time that you hit 500,000, gaining 100 followers, you feel nothing. Gaining 10,000 followers, you feel nothing. If you have a video pop up and you get 50,000 likes, I promise you, when you're at a stage where you've hit a video that's had 800,000 likes before, you do not give a shit. You're like, that's good. That's okay. You know what I mean? And I remember being the guy 3 years ago, hitting his first video at 50,000 likes and thinking, I don't know what to do with myself. I'm ecstatic. It doesn't mean you're unappreciative. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means that psychologically you have been conditioned to have a new floor of what you consider to be acceptable or failure or success, and you can become so impartial to it. It's not even, people are, I'll say the video bombed and they're like, oh, it didn't bomb. It did okay. I'm like, I don't give a shit. It didn't do well. I know what's well and I know what's not well. It didn't do well. You know what I mean? That's how impartial you get to these kinds of things. And that's why I like reconnecting in the comment section with people. That's why I like taking the time to really try and develop one particular video that means a lot to me, a song that I made or something, because the rest of it blends in. So my advice to you is ask yourself what your goal is. And I don't just mean your follower count, because you could just pick any number. You could pick 50 billion. Followers are infinite. The populace will continue to grow. New people will cycle in. You'll never have every follower. So, don't make it a follower count. It's fun, but why? Why do you want 1 million followers? Why do you want 10 million? Do you want to be on a show? Do you want your product to be seen? Are you trying to find a way to get a job because of your content? If you truly are going to invest this much time, and I promise you, it's a lot of time, more of your life will go into content creation if you're serious about it than you ever would have imagined. You'll be on it at the dinner table. You'll do it while you're sitting on the toilet. You'll think of ideas. People will tell you that they get tired of you telling them. That would be a good content idea. It becomes what you do for a living, and it becomes your life. So if you're going to do it, have a reason to do it besides the number of people that press the follow button. Because if you don't, you will never have an end. That's my advice. It's great. It's fantastic. It's so much fun. So many good opportunities and people that I've met with genuine souls. So much good has come from this. But if I never had a goal or a purpose for doing all of it, I might as well just have been chasing a high.
Mm-hmm.
There would have been no point getting sober. I could have just done that instead, because I actually physically felt that. Don't chase a high with content. Have a purpose for what you're doing, and you'll have a lot more fun that way.
Oh, it's so perfect to wrap up the show that's about passion and purpose. I love it. Thank you so much for giving me your morning and
I had a blast.
For sharing so much about your life. That's just so important for other people to hear, and letting people know about WhiteFlag and just in general being brave Dave. I think it's great, and I think that it makes me happy knowing that you have so many followers, because it's just more people who might have that moment today because they saw something that you made, and I think that's great.
Well, thank you. You do this exactly right. I felt very comfortable here, and I can't wait for you to have even more guests after me, and all the best to you. Thank you so much.
I hope that everyone out there watches this whole conversation and has that moment, or they watch 10 minutes of this conversation and they have that moment, or they watch 1 minute of this conversation and they have that moment. Can you tell everyone where they can find you on the internet?
Yeah, I am finally the same on my handles across everything. It's brave.dave.official. Any of those platforms, I'll be on there. And WhiteFlag is at WhiteFlag app on any of the platforms as well. Either one, you'll find me there. I make content on both of them. So
perfect. Thank you so much for being here. Thank everyone for listening to the Reach the Stars podcast. I have been your host, Janna Willoughby-Lohr. And if you love this show, the only thing I can ask is that you tell somebody about it. That's it.
Shout up from the rooftops. Hello.
Yes, share it out in the world and have that moment with somebody today. Awesome.
A single interaction has the power to change your life forever. This is the place for the stories of those moments. Stories of pursuing dreams, overcoming tragedy and failure, of coming back to life after so much of what feels like dying, of continuing on with only a vision as a map. This is the place where those moments live on. Come sit by the fire, look up at the stars, and be forever changed too.
Thank you for being with us on the Reach the Stars podcast. Our theme music is generously provided by Biocratic. You can find him on bandcamp.com. Thank you to all of our current patrons, guests, and everyone else who helps make this dream a reality. We are so proud to be building this amazing community with all of you. If you love this podcast, please consider sharing with a friend, leaving a review on iTunes, and becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/reachthestars. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to see the videos of these conversations. We'll see you next time. In the meantime, do something cool and tell us about it.